Hollywood spent decades trying to understand the friendship between Michael Jackson and Elizabeth Taylor. Tabloids called it strange. Critics called it publicity. The media called it everything except what it actually was. But here's what most people don't know. This wasn't just a friendship between two celebrities. This was a bond forged in isolation, trauma, and a level of fame that only two people on Earth could truly understand. There was one moment, one specific night in 1984, that changed everything between them. A moment that revealed why no one else in Hollywood could have filled the role Elizabeth Taylor played in Michael Jackson's life. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why this friendship was actually inevitable. Let's dive in. Let me paint the picture for you. In 1984, Michael Jackson was at the absolute peak of global fame. Thriller had sold over 40 million copies. He just won 8 Grammy Awards in a single night, a record that still stands. He was performing for sold-out stadiums across the planet. But here's where it gets interesting. At the exact same time, he was more isolated than he'd ever been in his life. The fame had become so massive, so all-consuming, that Michael couldn't leave his house without causing chaos. He couldn't go to a restaurant, couldn't walk down a street, couldn't live anything resembling a normal life. Now, here's the kicker. Elizabeth Taylor had been living that exact reality for over 30 years. She became a star at age 12 in National Velvet in 1944. By the time she was a teenager, she was already one of the most famous faces on the planet. She'd been married 8 times. She'd been hunted by paparazzi before the word paparazzi even existed. She understood something about fame that almost no one else could comprehend. The complete loss of privacy, the transformation from person to product, the suffocating weight of being a global icon. But that's not all. Both of them had something else in common that nobody talks about. Childhood fame that was stolen from them. Elizabeth Taylor started working at 10 years old. Michael Jackson started performing at 6. Neither of them had a normal childhood. Neither of them went to regular school, had regular friends, or experienced regular adolescence. They were both manufactured into entertainment products before they could even understand what was happening to them. Think about what that means. When Michael met Elizabeth, he wasn't just meeting another celebrity. He was meeting someone who'd walked the exact same path, felt the exact same isolation, and survived the exact same transformation. Here's where it gets deeply personal. Their first real connection happened at the 1984 Grammy Awards. Michael had just won 8 awards. The entire industry was celebrating him. But Elizabeth Taylor saw something nobody else noticed. She saw the exhaustion. She saw the pressure. She saw a 25-year-old man who'd been performing since he was a child and had never been allowed to just exist. After the ceremony, she approached him, not to congratulate him on the awards, not to take a photo. She wanted to talk privately, away from the cameras. She gave him her private phone number and told him to call her anytime he needed to talk to someone who understood. Now, most people would assume this was just a nice gesture from one star to another. But here's the truth. Elizabeth Taylor didn't give her private number to just anyone. She was one of the most famous women in the world. She knew exactly what she was offering: a lifeline, a safe space, a connection to someone who'd survived what Michael was currently experiencing. And Michael called her. Not the next day, that same night. They talked for hours. Not about music, not about movies, about what it feels like to be trapped by fame. About the loneliness of being recognized everywhere, but truly known by almost no one. But wait, this is where the story takes a turn that most people completely misunderstand. The media immediately started spinning narratives. Some tabloids suggested it was romantic, others called it a publicity stunt. Industry insiders questioned why the biggest pop star in the world would be friends with an actress whose box office peak was decades behind her. None of them understood what was actually happening. This wasn't about career strategy. This wasn't about image management. This was about survival. Anyone who's worked in Hollywood knows that fame at this level creates a specific kind of isolation. You can be surrounded by thousands of people and still be completely alone because nobody around you can relate to your reality. Michael and Elizabeth didn't need to explain that to each other. They lived it. Here's exactly how that matters. After that first phone call, they became inseparable. Not in a public way, in a private, protected way. Michael would visit Elizabeth's Bel Air estate late at night when no paparazzi were around. They'd watch old movies together. They'd talk about art, spirituality, the trauma of child stardom. Elizabeth introduced Michael to her collection of classic Hollywood films. Michael played her unreleased music. But more importantly, they created a space where neither of them had to perform. Elizabeth didn't have to be the legendary beauty. Michael didn't have to be the king of pop. They could just be two people who understood each other's pain. Now here's something most people never knew. Elizabeth was one of the few adults Michael allowed into Neverland Ranch without any formality. She had her own suite, her own golf cart. She'd arrive unannounced, and Michael wouldn't just welcome her, he'd light up like a child seeing their favorite grandmother. They developed private rituals, Thursday afternoon tea parties where they'd gossip about old Hollywood. Late-night conversations in the movie theater, where Michael kept a collection of Elizabeth's classic films. She taught him about the studio system that had controlled her youth. He showed her the zoo he'd built as the childhood sanctuary he never had. Now, here's where it gets even better. In 1993, when the first allegations against Michael emerged, Hollywood turned its back on him overnight. Projects were canceled. Endorsements disappeared. Friends stopped calling. The industry that had celebrated him just years earlier suddenly treated him like he was radioactive. But Elizabeth Taylor did the exact opposite. She didn't issue a carefully worded statement through a publicist. She went on national television and defended him publicly. She called the accusations lies. She stood by him when almost everyone else walked away. Think about what that decision cost her. Elizabeth Taylor was a legendary figure with decades of goodwill in Hollywood. Defending Michael Jackson in 1993 was not a safe career move. She risked her own reputation, her own legacy, to stand by someone she believed in. This is where it gets deeply revealing about who Elizabeth Taylor actually was. She'd spent her entire life being judged, criticized, and reduced to tabloid headlines. 8 marriages, public battles with addiction, health crises that played out in the press. She knew what it felt like to be vilified. She knew what it felt like when the truth about your life gets buried under speculation and gossip. So when Michael faced the same treatment, she didn't hesitate. She recognized the pattern. She'd lived it herself. But that's not all. During the darkest period of Michael's life, Elizabeth was the one who encouraged him to get help. When the prescription drug dependency became dangerous, she intervened, not through the media, not through lawyers. She sat with him, privately, and shared her own story of addiction and recovery. She'd been through it herself, multiple times. She knew the signs, she knew the denial, and she knew how to get through it. Michael later credited Elizabeth with saving his life during that period, not metaphorically, literally. She got him into rehabilitation. She visited him during treatment. She was there when he came out. Let me break down exactly why no one else in Hollywood could have played this role in Michael's life. They could never have the shared experience of child stardom. Elizabeth understood what it meant to have your childhood commodified and sold. They could never have the same level of fame. Most celebrities are famous. Michael and Elizabeth were global icons on a level that transcends normal celebrity. They could never have the history of being destroyed by tabloids. Both of them had been chewed up and spit out by media narratives multiple times. They could never have the survival instinct. Elizabeth had been counted out, written off, and declared finished multiple times. She always came back. They could never have the willingness to risk everything. Standing by Michael in 1993 required courage that most people in Hollywood simply don't have. They could never have the lived experience of recovery. Elizabeth had fought her own battles with addiction and won. She knew the path, and they could never have the ability to see past the persona. Elizabeth knew Michael the person, not Michael the product. She'd been a product herself for 50 years. Here's exactly how to think about it. Most friendships in Hollywood are transactional. They're about what you can do for each other's careers. This friendship was therapeutic. It was about what they could do for each other's survival. Michael didn't just admire Elizabeth Taylor, the actress. He needed Elizabeth Taylor, the survivor. And Elizabeth didn't just enjoy Michael Jackson, the entertainer. She recognized Michael Jackson, the isolated child star who never got to grow up normally. Now, here's where the story gets even more powerful. In 1997, Michael asked Elizabeth to be his son, Prince's godmother. Think about what that means. Michael Jackson, one of the most protective fathers in celebrity history, chose Elizabeth Taylor to be the person who would look after his children if something happened to him. This wasn't just about friendship anymore. This was about family. This was about trust at the deepest possible level. Elizabeth accepted immediately. She took the role seriously. She was present at birthdays, holidays, and family gatherings. She became Grandmother Elizabeth to Michael's children. When Michael died in 2009, Elizabeth was one of the first people his family called. But wait, there's one more layer to this that most people never consider. Michael Jackson and Elizabeth Taylor were both incredibly generous philanthropists who rarely talked about it publicly. Elizabeth founded AMFAR, one of the first major AIDS research foundations, in 1985. She raised hundreds of millions of dollars for HIV/AIDS research when the disease was still heavily stigmatized. Michael donated hundreds of millions to various charities, often anonymously, throughout his entire career. They bonded over this shared value, the belief that fame should be used to help others, not just enrich yourself. They attended charity events together. They co-chaired fundraisers. They used their combined star power to raise awareness and money for causes they believed in. Here's the truth. The media spent decades trying to understand this friendship through a Hollywood lens. They looked for the angle, the transaction, the publicity strategy. But this friendship was never about Hollywood. It was about two people who'd been swallowed by fame before they could even understand what fame meant, finding each other and creating a safe space where they could just be human. Elizabeth Taylor once said something that really stuck with people who knew them both. She said Michael had the heart of a child in the best possible way. He was curious, creative, and saw magic in the world that most adults had forgotten how to see. She said being around him reminded her of what it felt like to experience joy before the world complicated everything. Think about what that reveals. Elizabeth Taylor was 52 years old when she first became close with Michael. She'd lived multiple lifetimes worth of experiences. She'd been married to some of the most famous men in the world. She'd won Academy Awards. She'd survived scandals that would have ended other careers. But Michael made her feel something she'd lost decades earlier. Wonder, playfulness, the ability to be silly and creative without judgment. And Michael needed that from her too. He needed someone who'd been through hell and came out the other side still capable of love, still capable of trust, still capable of fighting for what mattered. When Elizabeth Taylor died in 2011, just 2 years after Michael, the world lost the last person who truly understood what it meant to be Michael Jackson. She'd been his protector, his defender, his friend, and his family. She'd stood by him when the world turned against him. She'd saved his life when addiction threatened to take it. She'd loved his children like they were her own grandchildren. This wasn't just a celebrity friendship. This was a lifeline between two people who'd survived fame that would have destroyed almost anyone else. So there you have it. The real reason Michael Jackson and Elizabeth Taylor's friendship worked when Hollywood never understood it. It wasn't about career strategy or publicity. It was about two child stars who'd been turned into global icons before they could consent to it, finding each other and creating a space where they could finally just exist as people. This friendship wasn't built on red carpets or photo opportunities. It was built in private phone calls at midnight, in quiet conversations about trauma and survival, in the simple act of being seen and understood by someone who'd walked the exact same impossible path. The world saw two megastars. They saw each other as two people who'd survived the unsurvivable and refused to let fame destroy them completely. So, there you have it. The real reason Hollywood never understood the friendship between Michael Jackson and Elizabeth Taylor. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.